So UFC Denver is going to be taking place not this weekend, but next weekend at the time that this video does get uploaded, and the reason why I have delayed it so long is because I just simply don't really believe that this card is completed. Yesterday, at the time of me recording, of course, this card only had 8 fights on it, and this morning they just added 2 more fights to make it a 10 fight card, with still a couple of upcoming opponents to be announced for Drew Dober and Nazim Salikhov at lightweight. So hopefully by the time that next week rolls around in my kind of normal schedule for predicting cards, we have 12 fights on the card. Ideally, that is what happens. But now let's just get into it. The first fight that was announced this morning still hasn't quite been uploaded to Tapology, but it is Blackshear fighting against Montel Jackson at bantamweight. I mean, Blackshear doesn't accept fights on full camps, it seems. This guy is always taking fights on short notice. He made his debut against Yusuf Zalal on short notice, and now that draw, I guess, has actually aged very well, as Zalal has been on an absolute tear since being released by the UFC. And then he beat Jose Johnson by Twister in the first round, and just 1 week later goes out there and fights against Mario Batista, but unfortunately wasn't able to come away with the win there. Montel Jackson, in my opinion, has been deserving of a top 15 opponent for quite a while now, and especially just since his last win over Rani Yahya, where he did knock him out in the first round, and he has been given those opportunities. It's just that, unfortunately for him, those fights have been getting cancelled for some reason or another, and he just hasn't quite been able to make it to the cage to fight against these top 15 guys. Montel Jackson, though, he's got a lot of power for the weight class. He's got massive hands for the weight class, if that means anything, because he actually has the biggest hands in the UFC. And when Francis Ngannou was in the UFC, Montel Jackson had bigger hands than Francis Ngannou. So massive hands for Montel Jackson, massive power for Montel Jackson at the weight class. Although he doesn't necessarily knock everyone out, I believe he has dropped every single opponent that he has fought in the UFC. He dropped Jesse Strader like 4 or 5 times in the 2 minutes that fight took place. Poor JP Bays got dropped like 5 times in the time that fight took place as well. Montel Jackson has big power. He's got good takedown defense. He's big for the weight class, and I think that he should be able to finish Blackshear here. Now, Blackshear has never been finished in his career. He is definitely a wrestler and a grappler, and he probably will be looking to get this fight down to the ground. But I do like this matchup for Montel Jackson. Both guys are pretty big for the weight class, standing at 5'10" for bantamweight, but the power is definitely on that Montel Jackson side, and he has proven it against UFC level competition recently. And the next fight that was added on short notice was announced this morning is Joshua Van taking on Charles Johnson. And if these guys aren't your favorite flyweights in the UFC, they probably should be, because they both want to fight regularly, they both want to fight super often, and Joshua Van's always calling for fights on Twitter. Charles Johnson is always calling for fights on Twitter. These two are guys that want to fight as often as they possibly can, and they're always going to show up on short notice if they do get the call. Joshua Van has built a pretty sizable fan base in the time that he has been in the UFC, to the point where I feel like a lot of people rate him so highly. I think they might rate him too highly. Like, there are people out there that think that Joshua Van is a top 10 flyweight in the UFC, and for me, I'm just kind of yet to still really see it. And with Charles Johnson, you know, he's very up and down in his career. You know, we have seen some good performances. I know he did lose to Muhammad Mokaev, but he didn't look bad in that performance, showed pretty good takedown defense in that fight. I know he got taken down a lot, but he was instantly getting back up and was showing pretty good defensive wrestling. And then I said that he had good takedown defense against when he fought against Azat Maksum, and you guys did not like that take whatsoever. But it's not a take, it is just a fact. Charles Johnson does have incredible takedown defense, even though his takedown defense percentage is not like very, very good. You know, he did defend most of Azat Maksum's takedowns and actually shot for offensive takedowns against Azat Maksum in that decision win. And then against Jake Hadley shot 11 takedowns against Charles Johnson, and he got none of them. So I feel like if Joshua Van wants to get takedowns, which he probably won't, I don't think you will be able to get Charles Johnson down, as I would say that Jake Hadley probably is a better pure grappler than Joshua Van is. But grappling isn't Joshua Van's game. Joshua Van is a boxer for the weight class, and he is very powerful despite being quite small for the weight class, in my opinion. I have said it before, and I will say it again. I actually do believe that Joshua Van is very small for 125 pounds, and he usually is the smaller fighter in his fights. Especially, he was smaller than Felipe Benez, who is just a big flyweight in general, though, to be fair. He fought against Kevin Borjas, and in my opinion, I don't think that was a stock-raising performance. I know a lot of people like that fight, but Kevin Borjas, man, I'm telling you guys, he probably is the worst striker at 125 pounds right now. And then, oh, well, he's the worst striker that's a pure striker. I mean, there are people like Jimmy Flick that do exist, but and then he fought Shemekilov, but that was short notice. I'm not really going to take too much away from that one there. For Charles Johnson, he is very good at Muay Thai. You know, he did win that Muay Thai scholarship at Tiger Muay Thai a few years ago, and he also does have pretty good wrestling as well. In fact, he has actually showcased some offensive wrestling recently in his matchups, where he did shoot for 6 takedowns against Razak Maksum. So he has shown that he is willing to wrestle and offensively wrestle against other pure strikers. So when it comes down to this matchup being added on short notice, it is worth noting that this card is going to be at UFC Denver, which I believe is at high elevation. And it's also worth noting that out of the 2 that have had a camp, Joshua Van has probably been in camp for longer, because Joshua Van has had many fights cancelled. You know, he's actually meant to fight just last month against Tagir Ulanbekov, but that fight was cancelled as Tagir did miss weight by quite a bit. And just overall, he's had so many fights happen, but then get cancelled over the last month or so. Whereas Charles Johnson has kind of just been sitting around and waiting for a fight for him to be announced. So out of the 2, if anyone is probably more quote-unquote prepared for a short notice matchup, it probably will be Joshua Van. But in a very unpopular take, I am actually going to pick Charles Johnson to win this matchup here. I do understand that people love Joshua Van, but I have seen him taken down many times on the regional scene. And I know that was a couple of years ago, and now that he's nearly 23 years old, he is improving, he is getting much better. I think that Charles Johnson just is so much bigger than him in the cage. You know, Charles Johnson's a pretty big guy for 125 pounds. If he is going to offensively wrestle, which I do believe he's going to do, I believe that's going to be a potential big advantage for him. We've seen Joshua Van taken down before. I think we're going to see him taken down again. And unlike a lot of the guys in the past who have taken down Joshua Van and then subsequently have just knocked him out, Charles Johnson is a much better striker than all of those guys as well. So overall, I do like the well-rounded skill set out of Charles Johnson, and I do believe he's probably going to be a pretty heavy underdog in this one here, just because people really do rate Joshua Van very highly. And now we have a fight which is the definition of an Apex fight, but for some reason, the UFC decided it would be a good idea not only to put this fight in front of a crowd, but also put it in front of a crowd at elevation. Andre Petroski is a very interesting case, because in his last fight, he knocked himself out attempting a takedown. He knocked himself out attempting a takedown against Jacob Malkoun, and if that doesn't describe Andre Petroski to you, then I don't know what does, because he has been built up by the UFC for no reason, to be honest with you. I actually genuinely don't understand why they did this, but they seem to like him a lot from the Ultimate Fighter, and he even lost to Brian Battle. And then he took a fight against Michael Gilmore, former Ultimate Fighter guy, not UFC level whatsoever. And he takes a fight against the GOAT, Yao Zhonghu, not UFC level whatsoever. And then kind of out of nowhere, he does pick up a very good win over Maximov and Wellington Turman. But then I thought he lost to GM3. You know, and in that fight, he gassed out. And now this fight's at elevation. And in that fight as well, out of all of the fighters on the weight class, GM3 exposed them for having bad striking. Like, is that absolutely insane? And then he obviously gets knocked out by Mikhail Pahea because he doesn't know how to strike, and then he knocks himself out. He knocks himself out against Jacob Malkoun, attempting a takedown. But anyway, Andre Petroski, I don't think is a very good striker at all. All he has is a left hook. That's it. It's all he throws. It's all he has. It's very powerful nonetheless, but it's all he has. He doesn't have anything else to offer on the feet whatsoever. But what he does have is very solid grappling. And I do believe he's going to be able to get the fight down to the ground against Josh Fremd if he doesn't knock himself out in the process. But Josh Fremd's interesting to me because he's okay. I mean, he's got all of the physicals to really make it in the weight class. He's very tall. He's 6'4" with a 76-inch reach. His striking's decent, but he is hittable, and he has been finished quite a bit. I mean, Roman Kopylov TKO'd him with a shot to the liver. Tracy nearly pulled his head off with that brutal guillotine. I think it was brutal. That's probably one of the most brutal guillotine chokes we've ever seen. And then he did lose to Anthony Hernandez, but Anthony Hernandez is just a nightmare matchup for anyone. And we have seen him get knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez in the LFA as well. Overall, I think that Ange Petroski should be able to get the takedowns. I do worry about the cardio because we have seen him gassed out before, and once again, this card is at elevation. But if the fight does get down to the ground, which I think it will, Petroski does have very solid grappling, so I like him to win by submission, actually, against Josh Fremd here. He just needs to watch out for his own knees, you know, to not knock himself out, really. Yeah, the odds are even for this one here. Don't bet on this fight. Just don't. Trust me, there are much better opportunities. This is not one of them. And now Viviane Araujo fights against Jasmine Jasudavicius at women's flyweight. And I do like Jasmine Jasudavicius to win this one here. She is very big for 125 pounds. And overall, she does have a very good, well-rounded skill set where she is not only just a pretty decent striker, she also does have pretty good wrestling as well. And I do think that is probably where she's going to find the most success against Viviane Araujo, as she is going to be a lot bigger than Viviane Araujo, and Araujo is a Muay Thai striker and doesn't necessarily offer too much else, really. Now, in hindsight, her performance against Alexa Grasso has aged incredibly well, but since then she has lost a couple of fights, albeit to elite competition really, in Amanda Ribas and Natalia Silva, who we now know is quite good. She did beat Jennifer Maia, and Jennifer Maia, you know, has turned away pretty good prospects in the past, but Araujo is now nearly 38 years old. She's small for 125 pounds, and I think that Jasmine Jasudavicius is a pretty high volume striker and can work in wrestling as well. We did see her lose to Tracy Cortez, which wasn't the best performance for her, but Tracy Cortez went out there and looked really good, in my opinion, in that comeback fight. Showcased really good boxing and just really good technical boxing. And maybe Viviane Araujo could kind of see that Jasmine Jasudavicius was leaving herself to be hit in that matchup and could just kind of get the strikes going. But I do like Jasmine still overall in this fight to mix in the striking and the wrestling to win a decision. Once again, noting that it is at elevation, but I don't think that should be too much of a problem for her. The next fight is also at women's flyweight, and that is Luana Santos fighting against Mariya Agapova. It's just a Mariya Agapova fade, to be honest with you, and the reason why is because there's kind of a lot of stuff coming out for Mariya Agapova. You know, we have kind of seen that she has been posting online that now she doesn't have a home, and it is really sad, and she had a friend that was trying to kind of use her. It's just a really sad situation, to be honest, overall. But when it does come down to her fighting style, Mariya Agapova actually is, in my opinion, a very solid striker, but she doesn't have any grappling whatsoever. Now, Luana Santos, I would say, is also a striker, to be fair. She did kind of come out of nowhere with her UFC debut and did knock out Juliana Miller, but let's all be honest here, Juliana Miller's striking just is not very good. But then aside from that, she did defeat Stephanie Egger, and that fight was at 135 pounds. That's right, it was at 135 pounds, and Luana Santos missed weight by so much, even though she's a woman's flyweight. So maybe something to keep your eye on here. Can she make the weight class at 125 again? Who knows? She probably can. We have seen fighters a lot take fights up a weight class and then miss weight, just because I think that they misjudge it, but nonetheless, I think in this matchup, honestly, Luana Santos would be smart to try and wrestle Mariya Agapova. Now, Agapova's a good striker. She is very fast for the weight class as well, but she's got no grappling. She's got no grappling at all. And I think Luana Santos would be smart to go out there and get takedowns and to grapple. And we just saw her defeat Stephanie Egger, who is a very solid judoka and I believe a multiple-time national judo champion. So in this one here, I'm going to go with Luana Santos. I'm actually going to pick her by submission just because Agapova, as I did say, doesn't really have any grappling whatsoever. Christian Rodriguez is fighting again at featherweight against Julian Erosa. He is a bit of a polarizing figure to me, a guy that I just kind of leaves a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth because he was so good at 135 pounds. But he ruined some really solid prospects by missing weight, man. You know, like he beat Cameron Simon, who was undefeated at the time, and he missed weight in that fight. He beat Real Rosas Jr., who was, of course, undefeated at the time, and he missed weight. And then, 145 pounds. Isaac Dalgarian doesn't get the decision against him. It is what it is. It is what it is. But, yeah. Overall, though, Christian Rodriguez, his skill set is amazing. But he's missed weight a couple of times, and then that dodgy decision in the last fight, it kind of does leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. But when it does come down to him, he actually is a very solid boxer and wrestler. Overall, he's actually a very talented fighter, and he has underrated pure grappling, which I think can mostly be kind of showcased in his loss to Jonathan Pearce, and he took that fight on short notice at 145 pounds, and Jonathan Pearce is massive, 145 pounds, and is a very slick grappler, and Christian Rodriguez was able to kind of deal with that grappling and have very good moments in that fight. Now we'll take it on Julian Erosa. He's definitely a fighter that I think has probably seen better days, and he has been finished not a lot in his career, but he has been knocked out a couple of times. Never mind, he's been knocked out 7 times. He got knocked out by Fernando Padilla, and then before that, he did get knocked out by Alex Caceres and Sungwoo Choi. And Julio Arce, okay, and Devontae Smith. Alright, I was yapping. But Julian Erosa, I kind of consider him to mostly be a little bit of a Muay Thai striker. I know he does have a lot of submission wins, but I would kind of believe that he's a striker first, really. C-Rod is probably more of a boxer first, but he can wrestle offensively and he can grapple as well. And when it does come down to this fight, there is going to be a size difference, because although Christian Rodriguez missed weight so much at 135 pounds, he wasn't actually that big for 135 pounds, like at all, to be honest with you. So I don't understand how he missed weight so much. Like, I just genuinely don't get it. But he's at 145 now, which I guess might be a bit more of a comfortable weight class for him. And against Julian Erosa, who's a massive guy but has been finished a lot, I think that we probably will see C-Rod go out there and find success in the boxing. He's going to have to close distance against Julian Erosa and shoot for takedowns. I'm actually not that confident in Rodriguez in this one here, but I am going to pick him to win by decision. And I guess that win over Isaac Dalgarian is probably going to age pretty well. C-Rod is minus 250 on one sportsbook. I wouldn't line it that wide, that's for sure. Now Cody Brundage returns after his fight against Bonacol versus Abdul Razak Alhassan. I'm going to pick Abdul Razak Alhassan here. I mean, Abdul Razak Alhassan kind of always seems to be on the edge of potentially getting released by the promotion. You know, he did have a 3-fight losing streak at one point with a couple of weight misses, and then he knocks out Alessio de Chirico in 17 seconds and saves his career. Has Joaquin Buckley in a lot of trouble when that fight has aged pretty well, and then he wins and he loses again. Cody Brundage fought against Bonacol recently, of course, and that really was kind of an opportunity for him to showcase his striking, but Brundage's fight IQ needs to be studied for generations, because I understand that Brundage isn't really the most powerful guy, but Bonacol really gave him opportunities on the feet to land strikes, and what did he do? He threw like spinning back fists and spinning wheel kicks, and was just kind of sliding around on the floor, like doing nothing really. Whereas if he kind of stuck to fundamentals, he could have potentially tried to land something on Bonacol, but yeah, he did defense takedowns, I guess, but that was kind of cool to see. Abdul Razak Alhassan, as you can kind of tell from his nickname, actually does have a judo background, and he is actually very well known for sticking around at the end of training sessions at his gym and offering judo lessons for those that wants to have that extra training at the end of the lesson. So he's kind of a very good guy to have in your gym. Except he doesn't really use that judo too much in the UFC, because he's just trying to knock you out. And that's what he brings to the table, is massive knockout power. He's very fun to watch. And honestly, I do think he is going to finish Cody Brundage in some way or another. Brundage is just so interesting to me, because if you watch his interviews, over and over and over again, he will talk about how he's been working on his striking and how he wants to showcase his striking and how he believes he's a better striker than everyone else says he is. And you do want to believe him, but then you see him go out there against Bonacol, he's not like striking. He's just throwing spinning wheel kicks and just not really fighting smart whatsoever. He's just trying to entertain the crowd, where it's like, Cody Brundage, if you win this fight against Bonacol, your life could potentially change. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. I do think Abdul Razak Alhassan is going to just have too much power to deal with Brundage here. And Brundage as well in general just always shoots for guillotines. He's just not a very intelligent fighter when it does come into that fight IQ. I think we're going to see him get finished here by Abdul Razak Alhassan. And I believe the odds are probably pretty close. I mean, Abdul Razak Alhassan's minus 155. He's probably going to win by knockout if he is going to win. And now Gabriel Bonfim fights Ange Loosa after his pretty sad loss to see, to be honest with you, against Nicholas Dalby, where things just weren't going his way, and he just kind of got TKO'd, really. But I still believe in his skill set, you know. Both Bonfim brothers, unfortunately, haven't quite really lived up to the hype that I definitely put them on, really. Because Gabriel Bonfim, if you didn't know, I know he's got a crazy grappling background. He's also got a pretty solid boxing background as well, because he was actually a national champion in professional boxing in Brazil. And he does have good striking. And he does like to throw down. But he's mostly known for that crazy grappling that he does have. And that was firstly showcased for sure on the Contender Series against Trey Waters, where Trey Waters actually shot for a guillotine, and he turned that guillotine attempt into a Von Flue choke. It was a very impressive performance. And then since then, has a fun scrap against Lazez, finishes him easily with a guillotine, finishes Trevin Giles pretty easily with a guillotine, after somewhat having to deal with some tricky jabs. Ange Loosa is no joke of a fighter, really, at all. He did have that fight against Brian Battle, which he was losing, and then the eye poke happened, and Brian Battle went nuts, but I don't know, I thought Battle kind of made himself look like a little bit of an idiot, to be honest, in that one, but it is what it is. He beats Reese McKee, but McKee has a big moment late, and then AJ Fletcher, sort of the same thing, except in the second round, it's AJ Fletcher who has a massive moment against him, and then he gasses out because it was at elevation, and Ange Loosa was able to actually win that third round by using his own wrestling. Loosa's a decent fighter. I don't really think that he is super like top 15 level, but I think that he probably is a guy that can actually challenge the top 25 of the division. I know that might sound crazy, but he has actually got a very good, well-rounded skill set, very decent boxing, decent wrestling as well. But I think that this is just a fight that Bonfim can win. Is it an easy return fight from your first loss in your pro career? Not really. But Dalby's kind of proven to be pretty decent. You know, he had a good fight against Renat Pakrenadov. Dalby's just tricky. Like, Dalby just wins. But he's like, I don't know how Dalby keeps winning, I'll be honest. But I think he should be able to defeat Ange Loosa here. He does have very solid boxing that hasn't really been showcased too much yet, I don't think. And a lot of people kind of only think for him for the grappling. But I do think we're going to see Bonfim come out here, find success with the hands against Ange Loosa. As we have seen Ange Loosa have to deal with some adversity on the feet before, like Brian Battle was able to find success, Reese McKee found success late in the fight, and also AJ Fletcher did as well against him. I like Bonfim to kind of make something happen on the feet and then work in the grappling, and I think that he probably will lock up some sort of finish, whether it is by TKO or by submission. I'm trying to find the fight on fightodds.io, and I can't find it. So that's fantastic, honestly. There we go. Bonfim is minus 400. Okay, the UFC is expecting him to win that one. And now Santiago Ponzinibbio comes back again against Muslim Salikhov. And now Muslim Salikhov is 40 years old. Muslim Salikhov's always been pretty old, but now he's 40. And Ponzinibbio is nearly 38. I mean, these guys, well-known fighters for sure, but they're not young. I am picking Santiago Ponzinibbio in the matchup, though. Now, Muslim Salikhov at some point actually was a guy that I did have like a lot of, not a hype for, I wouldn't say hype, but a lot of kind of respect for in his skill set, because he actually does have a massive background in Kung Fu, Wushu, I believe it is kind of what it was called, and he did turn away quite a few very good fighters. You know, he did have that win over the GOAT, GOAT Ronaldo, Francisco Trinaldo, but then it was kind of all put to a halt, really, with the knockout loss to Li Jingliang. And then ever since then, we just haven't really seen him look the same. I know he had that good performance against Fialho, which was crazy. He landed so many spinning kicks on that chin. But since then, it's kind of gone downhill. He loses to the man who just doesn't lose, Nicholas Dalby, with his karate style, and he gets TKO'd or knocked out actually by Randy Brown with a piston of a right hand. I think it's a winnable fight for Santiago Ponzinibbio. Now, Ponzinibbio, he had that time away. I believe he had, like, was it a blood disease or something along those lines? It was It was something pretty serious, and he had to take multiple years away. And then the UFC thought it was a really good idea to match him up with an up-and-coming, super powerful welterweight in Li Jingliang, who knocks him out in the first round. He actually has some problems against Alex Morono, who accepted that fight on short notice, but eventually finds the knockout over Morono and put him out pretty stiff in that matchup. Against Muslim Salikhov, though, I do believe he is still going to be the faster fighter. He does still have solid power for the weight class at 38, like we have seen when he brutally knocked out Alex Morono. But we have seen Ponzinibbio lose a lot of minutes on the feet as well. And for the most part, I think in this one here, Salikhov has just slowed down a lot. He's 40 years old. That sort of style isn't really showing to work anymore against these other guys. And to be fair, maybe it's kind of showing to not really work anymore against the guys kind of in this current generation, like Randy Brown and Li Jingliang. But Ponzinibbio kind of very loosely does sort of have that sort of style like Li Jingliang did when he does able to close the distance and use that boxing. He fights from range pretty well too. Had a pretty fun, close fight against Mikhail Pahea, which a lot of people think he won. And in hindsight, that's a very good performance to have. So I do like Ponzinibbio to go out there and knock out Muslim Salikhov here. Muslim Salikhov, he's always been an older guy. Always has been an older guy. But now he might just be getting a little bit too old. And returning only 5 months after getting knocked out like that, I don't really like it too much. Ponzinibbio's minus 210. Now we can move on to the main event. And I'll be honest with you, I am picking Royce Namajunas, but I'm losing confidence in that pick. I am. This is 5 rounds as well, right? It is 5 rounds. Okay. Okay. I've kind of regained slight confidence in Royce Namajunas now. This fight is at elevation. And because it is 5 rounds, and Royce Namajunas has been training for the full camp and for longer for this fight, I think that she probably will be able to kind of have the better cardio and will be able to last longer at this elevation. Because when we have seen cards in the past at elevation, we have seen a lot of trouble that the fighters have had to deal with, you know, like the Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards card. I believe every single fighter on that card gassed out, aside from Leon Edwards. Sorry, not Leon Edwards, aside from Kamaru Usman, because he trains at elevation. Royce Namajunas has had a full training camp to prepare for that elevation. Tracy Cortez, to my knowledge, just accepted this fight last week, because it was originally meant to be Macy Barber versus Royce Namajunas. And now the fight being 5 rounds, the elevation I think is going to play a very key factor here. Skill set wise, I don't really love Rose. Well, not really skill set wise, size wise, I don't really love Royce Namajunas' move to 125 pounds. You know, like she lost one time to Carla Esparza in what was a really bad performance, I will admit, and then just decided, okay, let's go to 125 and fight Manon Fiorot. Yeah, that was the decision that was made anyway. And then she does go out there and beat Amanda Ribas in the Apex, but Rose at 125, I don't really know what she's trying to prove, because she really could have just got a fight at the title again at 115 pounds a lot easier, in my opinion, than at 125, because there's a massive logjam right now, you know. I guess it is Manon Fiorot, but there's also Shevchenko in the mix too. Yeah. Now, Tracy Cortez, she's a wrestler. She used to dominate all of her fights in top position, but she took a lot of time off here between her last fight and her fight against Melissa Gatto, and in my opinion, showcased that she has really improved her striking, and I thought that her boxing looked really, really good against Jasmine Jasudavicius, and she was also able to mix in the wrestling as well, but it was mostly that boxing that she did showcase in that fight. And against Royce Namajunas, maybe that could definitely play a pretty good factor, because Royce Namajunas, although kind of used to having a little bit of a size advantage over girls at 115 pounds, isn't going to have that advantage really over Tracy Cortez, who has the same reach as her and is the same height, and probably is going to be bigger than her as well. Because Royce Namajunas, when it comes to her striking, she does like to fight from range a lot. She throws a lot of kicks, pretty high volume with the kicks as well. But now she's not going to be out of range of Tracy Cortez, you know, who is going to be the bigger fighter in the weight class, is going to have the better pure boxing as well, potentially, because Namajunas is a kickboxer, really does rely on those kicks to make things happen with the hands eventually. And then the grappling, pure grappling, BJJ wise, I would say Namajunas does have that advantage, but Tracy Cortez has shown very solid wrestling in her previous fights as well, very good ability to dominate and top control. So it is pretty low confidence for me, because if this fight was just a 3-round main event, I probably would actually side with Cortez to win 2 out of those 3 rounds, using that top control, dominating in top control, but it's not. It's 5 rounds. Rose Namajunas, I think, even though she might actually lose a couple of rounds early on to Cortez, finding success with the wrestling, it's fight ready MMA at elevation, and am I just waffling, but I think overall, we are going to see Rose Namajunas find success on the feet, and for longer too. I mean, I do think the fact that this is 5 rounds makes things quite serious. What is Tapology thinking? Namajunas 71% and by decision. I do think the fight goes the distance, but I think we are going to see Rose Namajunas go out there and find that success. But it is worth noting, Namajunas recently just has not looked like the fighter she used to. You know, when she was the champion at 115 pounds, and she knocked out Weili Zhang, and she beat her again in that fantastic fight, she looked terrible against Carla Esparza. Let's be honest here. She didn't look that great. I mean, she did look okay against Manon Fiorot, to be fair, actually. She put up a good performance, but who's her manager? That was a bad choice. I mean, of course, Manon Fiorot was going to win that one. And then she looked decent against Rebus, but she's not the same fighter she was at 115 pounds in her prime, in my opinion. But yeah, I think she does turn away Tracy Cortez here at elevation. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Rose Namajunas, and the odds is minus 260. Pretty odd. Pretty wide odds is where I was getting to. With all that being said, let me know what you think in the comments below.